Hello. For my midterm, I was assigned Chapter 5, Chapter 5 being primarily about groups. So, essentially, what is a group? Well, the sociology definition of a group is people with similar attributes who identify with each other and have lasting relationships. Social groups are different from aggregates. Aggregates are just people who happen to be at the same place at the same time, or members of a category like men and women over 40 would be considered aggregates. They don't have any sort of other social ties together besides that. The groups that we join are divided into two categories, this being primary groups and secondary groups. Your primary group is a group that one holds very dear to themselves, like their immediate family or very close friends. Secondary groups are usually less important, but still have a large impact on you, like peers or work colleagues. The groups that you join form a social group, or specifically your social group. Sociologist Duncan Watts found that others' opinions within our social groups help us to form our own opinions, and this leads us towards the concept of social influence and peer pressure, but we'll spend a little bit more time on that here in a minute. Within our groups, the one with the most ties to the most people in the group maintains the most influence. These ties with our group members have us build a homogenous group of people who provide opportunities for similar things the group does. And this was found by Mark Granovetter and published in his Strength of Weak Ties in 1973. For example, if your parents are medical doctors, you will more than likely inherit some sort of contacts like they have, being possibly other doctors, hospital staff, college staff where they went to medical school, etc. And this diversification of contacts and the opportunities that they can provide you with your own social network. And like the old saying goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And sociologists have always been fascinated by why groups are necessary and what influence they have on us as individuals. In Emil Durkheim's opinion, groups place limits on our actions, and that limit is necessary to not chase something that is unattainable. Chasing after something that cannot be achieved or not reached leads to a sense of normlessness or anomie. And being in groups, being a active member within these groups help us to avoid this, to avoid anomie. Durkheim believed as our world modernized more and more that we would be less connected to each other, and this opinion is also shared by Robert Putnam, who believes the good days are behind him and no one will ever want to join a group within their community, or within his community. This opinion is further expanded on by Marsh in 2012, who said shallower internet relationships aren't enough for us, and Sherry Turkle from MIT believes that we are actually beginning to prioritize technology over socializing with each other in person. I can agree to this as I feel guilty of myself. I feel guilty of this myself at times, wanting to be on my phone instead of going over to somebody's house to visit with them. However, this opinion is directly contradicted by Eric Killenberg and Cloud Fisher, who state we are no more or less social than we have ever been, despite technological advances. And in fact, Pew Research Center's Internet and American Life Project goes further to state we are even more connected than we ever have been due to technology, and we have been able to form our own virtual communities, such as World of Warcraft, which I actually played. And I believe that the social aspect of 20 some odd people having to get together and organize in order to accomplish some sort of goal for the night was half the reason why I played the game for so long, and was probably the reason why 5 million other people played the game as well. So, how do our social groups organize and accomplish whatever goal they might have? Well, how a group accomplishes a task together is referred to as group dynamics. The group you are loyal to is called the in-group, and the group of opposition are out-groups. For example, sports rivalries, or my personal favorite, firefighters versus cops, that's always being talked about, would be an example of an in-group and an out-group. Now, some groups can get a little bit carried away, where they kind of get ideals of superiority because of their race or their gender, and this can possibly lead to violent acts being done from one group onto another. But groups that provide standards that we evaluate ourselves by, like at work, is called a reference group. This would be, for example, car salesmen that are comparing the quantity of car sales amongst themselves in competition for a salesman of the month, trying to get that big bonus for the end of the month. How do we operate successfully within a group? Well, to operate successfully within a group, we need group cohesion. And in essence, group cohesion is enthusiasm for the group or for being within the group. A group of brand new cadets in the fire academy aren't going to have the same passion for each other as a group of firefighters who have been on shift together for over a decade and who have seen some things that possibly nobody else ever has, except for them that were there. Most people feel the best commitment when their group is able to accomplish some sort of task. This is why the fire academy and military basic training involve so many team building exercises to try to build that team cohesion. A group without cohesion, however, will always fall apart. There is a minimum level of cohesion that has to take place for the group to continue to operate together. Groups aren't always a good thing, as they can get together and they can do great wrongs also. When too many people agree on the same thing, or nobody feels like they're able to speak freely in a group or oppose the main idea of a group, that is called groupthink. And groupthink can be a shortcut to reasoning, and a group of people who blindly follow a leader is how you get somebody like the Nazi Party to take over a country like Germany. On a smaller scale, though, within a group, sometimes there is social influence, and now we're beginning to talk about that a little bit more. And we commonly refer to this as peer pressure. Peer pressure or social influence is something that we have all felt. Something like when a group of friends is trying to convince you to sneak out of the house at night, or staying out past curfew when you know you're supposed to be home and your parents are going to be wondering where you're at. Social influence can have an effect on how likely we are to do something small with minor consequences, such as sneaking out, or how likely we are to do something horrible, like rape somebody. And that's very interesting to think about. We give into social influence in one of three ways, and those three ways are called conformity. And further, these three types of conformity are split into three things called compliance, identification, and internalization. Compliance is going to be the weakest form of conformity, and this is most usually to avoid confrontation or punishment. Identification is when one becomes a part or maintains being part of a group and follows the actions of the group. Internalization is the strongest form of conformity, and that's when one's morals follow the group's ideals and the person feels that the group is morally just. Like when a person becomes one with the Holy Spirit in Christianity, something like that. So what happens when our groups start working together? Well, when people get together, undoubtedly more work is going to get done, but this is only to a certain point. As more and more people get added, production begins to suffer, and this is called social loathing. People are less motivated to work hard when there are plenty of people to do the same task. This is going to be if you ever have a group of buddies that come over to help you move. You know, if you have 3 or 4, it's pretty easy to decide who's going to do what and getting the goal accomplished. But if you ever invited 10 or maybe even 15 people to come and help you move, it's going to be a little bit harder to organize, and everybody's going to contribute a little bit less. The most important part of a group is going to be the leader, of course. That's pretty easy to guess there. The leader has the power to control the others in the group. And the authority that leaders hold come in 3 ways. And there's traditional authority, which is pretty much going to only be divine right, which is going to be kings and queens being born into the lineage of which they are able to rule their kingdom or country. Then there's going to be legal, rational authority, and that's going to be things like the U.S. presidency or any other elected official from around the world. And then there's going to be charismatic authority, and that's going to be when people follow after somebody simply because they feel like they are that charismatic and they want to follow the ideals that that person represents. Also, a leader doesn't have to have just any one of those categories. They can have any mix of those qualities to maintain their influence over a group. So as you can see, groups are necessary for us to maintain our way of life. Groups are essential for us to continue to advance as a culture and as a country. Very few people have ever had any sort of great breakthrough in their field without influence from others or collaboration from others within their field. I believe that Emil Durkheim said it best in the beginning of chapter 5, groups are essential.